They said the sea would stop us before the enemy ever could. It would pull at the wheels, rip cargo loose, break men into the stones of the surf, and then a truck rolled off a ship, kept rolling, and didn't stop when the ground vanished. It drove into the water as if the ocean were just another road you hadn't paid for yet. Not a battleship, not a pier. A six-wheeled hull with a propeller under its skin and a driver watching the line where white water turns black. The first time you see it float, you forget to breathe. The second time, you start to believe. On invasion beaches, the problem was simple and lethal. No harbor, no time, and too much sea. Waves hammer you sideways. Soft sand swallows axles. Tide flips schedules like cards. Conventional trucks die at the waterline. Lighters need piers. Men can carry only so much before courage turns into exhaustion. But cargo doesn't care about excuses. Ammunition wants dry hands. Fuel wants drums that don't leak. Radios want batteries that arrive while the fight is still happening. If the army couldn't bend the ocean, it needed something that ignored the argument and just crossed. Enter the ungainly beauty, a blunt-nosed amphibian with ribs like a boat and muscles like a truck. The idea sounds like a joke until you ride one. 6 tires that bite the beach, a prop and rudder that take over where footing ends, pumps whispering to keep the bilges honest, and a wheelhouse where a coxswain reads the surf the way a carpenter reads grain. No ceremony, no drama. You drive off steel, you drive into water, and the horizon stops being a threat and becomes a destination. Ugly, yes, until it saves a day. Here's the trick, and it's not complicated. Momentum and judgment. You commit on the swell, not in the trough. You meet the breaker with the bow high and the throttle ready. Tires soft enough to float on sand, firm enough to climb the ramp. Prop engaged when the axle starts to whisper surrender. The hull rides where a truck would drown. The truck pulls where a boat would bog. The driver's hands never stop moving. Steer into the shoulder of the wave, feel the lift. Choose a graceful failure if you must, then choose it early. The sea respects nerve if not permission. First trial. A single load when the line behind you grows like a storm. You can feel the weight of every item in the way a craft leans. Wooden crates, canvas bags, a crate marked fragile that is anything but. The waterline climbs. The bow kisses the foam. You hear sand under the tires like distant applause. 12 seconds decide whether the cargo lives. Up the final push. Angle left. Don't stall. Don't dig. Don't show the sea a mistake it can keep. Then you're over the lip, on the beach, alive, loaded, moving. And the shore party is already reaching for what you brought. Soft sand lies. It looks like land, but it behaves like water with cruel manners. The amphibian answers with pressure and patience. You don't gun it, you float the wheels. A touch of throttle to carry you across the places that swallow pride. A slide that feels wrong until you learn it's exactly right. There's a rule every driver learns by the second day. Never stop at the crest. Never turn your back to a wave. Never argue with a dune. You keep the load honest, keep the line straight, and keep your head when gravity tells you jokes. Multiply one craft by a dozen, then by 100, and the miracle looks routine. Ships anchor in a gray parade. Steel bellies open. Amphibians queue and feed. Out, in, turning salt water into a conveyor belt. A listening post on the bluff watches empty beaches turn into beach depots. Stacks of boxes marching inland. fuel drums walking themselves to a war they weren't invited to. The language changes too. Men stop saying, "if it arrives," and start saying, "when it gets here." That's what victory sounds like. Deadlines instead of prayers. Some trips bring more than crates. A stretcher lifts out of the salt shadow, canvas dark where water can't pretend anymore. You make room you don't have. You make time you weren't given. The sea is gentler on the way back when the cargo can look at you. Faces go pale in the spray, then pink in the wind, then stubborn in the sun. No one talks about heroism. They talk about the bump in the middle of the ramp and how not to hit it with a broken leg. Sometimes the machine saves what the plan forgot. Then the weather decides to prove the manuals were modest. Rain fattens the air until distance disappears. The line between wave and fog becomes a rumor. Night comes with its own tide. You steer by feel, the way the hull hums, the way the wheel grows lighter when you're in water that wants you. A bilge pump chatters like a cricket that knows bad news. The compass is faith, the shoreline is memory. You keep going because someone is counting on a box you've never opened, and you promised with your engine. Commanders arrive the same way everyone else does. Wet. The general standing in the well of an amphibian looks like a man who understands invention. He could have staged the moment. Big ship, big salute. But he chose the tool that actually works that day. Staff officers learn fast when their boots fill. The sea teaches without speeches. And on a good morning, when the clouds cut a door in the sky, you can see the plan as a single motion. Ship, wake, wheel, wave, beach, hand, road. Now the coastline learns a new word. Throughput. Amphibians shuttle until routine is louder than weather. They feed a hunger measured in tons and hours, not hopes. Watch the rhythm. A bow rising, a stern swinging, a rudder's tiny correction, a driver's breath held for the moment the wheels bite. On maps, this looks like arrows and numbers. On the ground, it looks like men learning to trust the next run more than they fear the last one. The miracle isn't a single crossing. It's that crossings don't stop. Stand back and the whole machine snaps into focus. No piers, no cranes, no safety net. Just a rolling harbor that drives itself, and a coastline that becomes its own port because a few thousand times a day, a craft decides that water is simply thinner land. The ocean never agreed. It doesn't need to. The proof is the stack that moves, the unit that eats, the radio that speaks. The wounded man who reaches a hand he didn't expect to find. The ugly truck with a secret becomes the most beautiful thing on that shore. We remember loud machines for how they sounded. This one is remembered for how it made silence useful. The space between waves. The pause where the ramp kisses foam. The breath right before the wheels lift. If someone asks what turned a landing into a supply line, you don't need a diagram. You point at the craft that kept two promises at once: to float when it must, and to drive when it could. And you tell them it looked ridiculous until the count of delivered loads made ridicule expensive. They called it a truck. The sea learned it was a key. It opened beaches that weren't ready, and it kept opening them until maps changed color, and enemies ran out of ways to say no. Not famous enough for parades, famous enough for outcomes. When history tallies miracles, it tends to favor the loud ones. This is the quiet kind, the kind that repeats. The day ends the way it began. bow into the surf, a throttle that chooses courage, a shoreline that stops arguing.